He was big, strong American Jesus.
There was a movie with bat nipples. We have to accept that.
Is it just me or does Deuteronomy sound like a dirty name for sex? Hey baby, you want to come over to my house and Deuteronomy?
Or Heracles was a piece of shit.
Well, like father, like son. Hello and welcome to the Church of Awesome.
The church to end all churches.
We'd like to thank you for joining our services today. Presiding in this meeting will be Bill. And I will be conducting. I am Demi-Pope Chris. Also joining us is the Archangel Michael.
Yeah.
For absolutely no reason, nothing suspicious at all, Cardinal Mom Spencer has been transferred to another diocese. So you probably shouldn't look into that or do anything at all. It's totally fine. So instead, we are joined by Jeremy, the Word.
Word.
Before we get started, we've got a lot of complaints saying, "Oh, Bill is not a real person." There are doubters amongst the congregation.
Heathens, as we call them.
Doubter's
Yes.
gonna doubt.
What's that?
Doubter's gonna doubt.
Yeah. Well, why don't you let them know that Bill is in fact a real person?
Well, as the Demi-Pope introduced me, I am Jeremy, the Word, and I have personally seen Bill. He has made himself manifest to me, and I can testify that he does exist.
Would you say that you have a personal relationship with Bill?
I do. It's a very personal. He's a very good friend of mine. We speak every day.
Excellent.
And no, I'm not on my knees.
So, and also before we get started, I'd like to remind our listeners that we have churchofawesome.com where you can follow along, download our podcast from there, play it in your browser, and see the bonus content that we have there. We always have some little, as we call them, naughty bits, which are things that didn't quite make it into the episode.
Should call it boner content.
Yes.
Enjoy our naughty bits. Stick them in your ears.
Yes.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. And also just blog posts about stuff that's topical or whatever. And if you have something to contribute, you can send us an email at demipopechris@gmail.com. Our topic today will be
Canon and continuity.
So we're going to have this discussion led by the Archangel Michael.
Hear him.
Okay, so today's topic is canon and continuity. We're going to start with talking about canon. What is canon? Why is canon? When and where and
Who.
Why and who? Yes, and who is canon? Okay.
And whence?
Yes.
From whence canon has come.
My favorite definition of canon that I've heard so far is established continuity. That actually was the definition given by Mahatma Ben on our paganism episode, and I thought that was perfect, and we're going to talk about why that's perfect. Okay, so canon is also defined as a rule or especially body of rules or principles generally established as valid and fundamental in a field or art or philosophy. And the word canon, by the way, comes from Greek kanon, meaning rule. You have two kinds of canons. You have the closed canon and the open canon, and the meanings are kind of pretty obvious from
Seems
the
to me
names.
a closed cannon wouldn't do the job very well.
Yeah. You can't launch a cannonball out of a closed cannon.
Yeah.
Yeah, closed cannon is a bomb.
Yeah. In a closed canon, the books have been written and nothing can be added or taken away. And in an open canon,
Well, do you have an example of a closed canon?
well, certainly many people call like the Bible a closed canon where you can't add or take away anything, which is funny because they have scriptures say you cannot add or take away from this work, otherwise you'll burn and your balls will be set on fire. Pretty sure that's something I said back in the day.
Yeah, the Revelator John was actually known for threatening to set people's balls on fire.
Yeah.
That's
Little known
kind of
fact.
his thing.
Yeah, why do you think he got exiled to the Isle of Patmos?
I'll set your balls on fire.
So, and it's funny because you can't add or take away. Well, it says in the book of Revelation. Okay, so everyone picks that one.
Because it's at the end of the Bible.
Exactly. But the same...
Not chronologically.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the people that read the Bible don't realize that.
Yeah.
Because they don't know shit about what they're reading.
Also, it says the exact same thing in the book of Acts and in Deuteronomy. So if we're going by that logic, everything after Deuteronomy...
Is it just me, or does Deuteronomy sound like a dirty name for sex? Hey, baby, you want to come over to my house and Deuteronomy?
I'll Deuteronomy you if you Deuteronomy me.
And then an open canon is more authorized additions can be made to the body of work.
So that's like Star
continuing.
Wars.
Yes, yeah, like continuing Revelation, you know.
Any video game series that's currently in production,
Yeah.
like Modern Warfare or Legend of Zelda.
Right. So let's hop to question 1. Why do we need a canon? And I came up with 2 answers. One answer is to preserve the coherence and the spirit of the mythos.
Yeah, so if you didn't have a canon, then you could say like, hey, there's a new book where Jesus is a vampire and he kills everyone.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that doesn't sound like
If
it.
you didn't have canon, then all the fucking fanboys would just write their fan fiction, and that would be accepted.
Just as valid as
just
anything
as
else.
valid as anything that's been written
Or
previously.
Link could be right-handed. And
Yeah, fuck that shit.
Yeah.
Fuck that. Fuck
Which
that
is-
actual canon bullshit.
Yeah, which is the actually
Maybe that should be my fatwa this week.
which is actually answer number 2 is so you don't have to defend unauthorized additions. So
Like
what
the CDI versions of Legend of Zelda. Look those up on YouTube. They're hilarious.
So you have the example of a mythos is the Star Trek mythos is an optimistic view of the future in which we value science, explore, and grow as a species.
So if you had something that came out that was not in keeping with that mythos, then you're like, well, what's the point of this whole? We're trying to tell this overarching
Do
story.
you guys know Spock is a dinosaur?
Yeah. Well, see, like, and if there's a new version of Star Trek that comes out where they're the conquerors and they're the evil ones, then you're like, well, that's not really Star Trek, then, is it?
Because there are different versions of Star Trek, and Star Trek does do a thing where they have a lot of different genres. Or Star Trek 6: Undiscovered Country is basically like a mystery plot, and you have different movies doing kind of different. They're tickling different genres, but they're not changing the entire core of what the show is, and in order to stay relevant, a franchise needs to be reinvented for the next generation. You have the phrase, "This isn't your father's Superman." They have originally, like in the 30s when Superman really came out, he didn't fly. He could just jump really high. He wasn't as fast, and now through the years,
He was only as fast as a speeding bullet.
right. And
Now he's a speeding bullet, faster than.
like now in the comic books, he can move planets out of orbits and reverse time, and just through different versions of Superman, he can do different
He
things.
just gets more and more super.
Yeah, that was kind of the rule was Superman can do anything except what he hasn't tried yet, and then when he tries that, he can do anything because he's super, and
He can do everything except kryptonite.
right.
That's basically it.
And Lois, because there's no way she could hold his baby. Some traits can be adjusted, but the mythos is the same. A kind-hearted alien from a dead planet comes to Earth and becomes his protector. Now, that's the main thing. So every story is going to have something to do with that. And if you change any part of the mythos, the core of what something actually is, then you'll have a non-canonical or alternate universe.
Yeah, you have like the Bizarro Superman.
Yes, like
stuff
Superman
that.
Red Sun is a good
Zombie
example.
Superman.
Yeah.
What's the Superman Red Sun?
That's the one
For
where
the non-nerds out
where Clark Kent Kal-El lands in Soviet Russia instead of Kansas, and so he grows up fighting for the
Soviets.
USSR. Yeah,
That's
it's so
I actually
good.
might want to read that.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, there's another
I
one.
freaking hate Superman.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go into why, but I
I
hate
don't.
him.
I don't blame
But
you for
that
You
actually
can go
sounds
into
good.
why, because I hate Superman too.
and I understand that it's not for everyone because Superman actually can be, if you don't read a lot of his stuff, he can seem very two-dimensional and not very accessible because he's invincible and everything seems so easy for him. But it's not. He's got a lot more character than you see.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying the
I am.
concept of Superman is stupid.
It is.
Yeah,
You're working your way to a fatwa.
I'll
Better move on from Superman.
Yeah, that only.
My
That only
fatwa
provides
is
us-
against people who hate Superman.
Yeah.
Fuck all of you.
No, it's
My
fine.
fatwa was against Superman.
So speaking of different versions, there are different versions of Jesus. You have different versions. Like one is completely human He was born human, and then when he was about to do his ministry, God adopted him to, and he gave him the extra powers to do so. That's called the adoptionist theory. They have one where he was always God the whole time. And I mean, if you look at like paintings from, then till now, you'll see Jesus portrayed as, some frail, like womany looking thing. And then I've seen him where he's just like super buff and all steroided out. Mm-hmm. And so,
well, he was a carpenter.
Roided Jesus.
Roided.
So you have different ones. The idea is
that's a bit of a different story though, because they're pulling from the same canon, they're just interpreting it differently. So is that more like, that's kind of the fan fiction thing where you reinterpret,
you imagine what's
canon.
there, and then you're like, well,
you just fill in the gaps.
Jesus would have been this big buff dude because he was a carpenter and he built shit. So obviously he's got muscles.
I don't know. I mean, think of the origin story of Superman. It's the same one. Krypton, the home planet, is about to get blown up, and the parents put him in a spaceship and send him to Earth, where he grows up and becomes, American and then fights. Like, that same story has been told. Same thing with Peter Parker getting bitten by a radioactive spider. You've seen it a bunch of times. Like, if you think of Spider-Man, someone who lived in the 60s, they'll think of that drawing of the original, Stan Lee drawings. If a kid who grew up now is say like, okay, picture Superman, they might think of Brandon Routh or one of the comic books that were drawn in the 90s. When I think of Superman, I think of the Death of Superman drawn in the early 90s. So it's the same story. But with a different,
yeah, but those are
icon.
Those are open canons, though, as opposed to the closed canon of the Jesus story.
Yes, that is definitely true.
So that's just reimagining.
The thing too, though, is open canon is still controlled canon. Open canon doesn't necessarily mean anybody and their mom can add to it.
I think it kind of depends on the
You
canon.
think so, but I'm gonna address that in a minute.
All right.
But first, another example, my favorite example of the modern Jesus is in the movie Dogma, where they have the Buddy Christ, where they reimagine Jesus with the thumbs up and a Fonzie look on his face to make it more accessible for today's Christian. We want to give a nice, softer, cooler, hipper image of the Catholic Church, and so they have this ridiculous-looking Jesus. And it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if that actually happens sometime. So, who decides what is canon? And the answer to that pretty much is whoever is in charge or owns the copyright. Warner Brothers producers decide the next version of Batman. They own the rights, and they're the ones paying the bills. One of the biggest pain in the ass of getting a movie franchise with a name you've heard of before.
One of the biggest pains in the ass.
Oh, what did I say?
Pain.
Pain in the asses?
One of the biggest pains.
Of the many pains in the asses.
Many pains and many asses.
To get a franchise with a name you've heard of before is a lot of work. And they still see it as worth it because when you have name recognition, you add a lot of financial security to your project. Because if you have like even a name that's stupid like Marmaduke, you're still going to be better off because the parents may have read Marmaduke when they were kids and
one
be
of the
curious.
worst comics in the Sunday comics.
Yeah, I never
by
read
far.
it.
Yeah, Marmaduke has never been funny.
Oh yeah,
I think actually Kathy might have been funnier than Marmaduke.
And that's really saying something.
So, and they will still fight to get the copyrights. And one of the reasons why, besides financial security, is they have control over what it is. So if, for example, the director wants nipples on the bat suit, that's going to be eventually decided by the guys in the suits, by the executives.
By the guys that own the copyright, yeah.
Exactly.
Not the guys in the bat suits.
Yes. The Catholicism took off because it was supported by the most powerful government and rich people. The rich people could buy the bishops that agreed with them or donate to the churches that build up, that house the bishops that agree with them.
Well, they were always playing a chess match with the politicians just so that they could, reinforce each other's power. That was the whole church and state thing, that you get these two power structures independently, you fuse them together, they become
superpower.
They become able to reinforce each other.
Yeah, exactly. The New Testament, you had in that area, you have a bunch of people writing about it because Jesus was, the whole Jesus story or the Messiah was a story that was being told in the area, at the time. It was a common tale. And so you've got lots of different versions, and you've got people just writing spin-offs and, Jesus as a kid, like the young Indiana Jones, but the young Indiana Jesus. And so you have,
the young Jesus Jones.
Versions, yeah. The versions where Jesus is a vampire or something, I'm sure it was just all over the place.
Speaking of what they're talking about, Jesus spin-off things. There's a really great book called Lamb by Christopher Moore, where it talks about he tries to basically tell the story of Jesus growing up, how he would have come up with the ideas that he was preaching. And so that is one that I would recommend. That can be part of the Church of Awesome canon.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, for hundreds of years, no one even decided what the canon was, what the Bible was. It was like, here's a bunch of works, and if you liked it, cool. If not, you don't have to.
I think it was more that you just had little pockets, little areas they would kind of decide on their own what
and
the best ones
a huge
were.
part of it, too, was the people they were preaching to didn't have any of it. So they just kind of had to take what their preachers told them at face value.
Yeah, so I guess it was whatever the preachers had. So when you came together, they would read stories, whatever ones that they had in their library.
Yeah. It wasn't until the printing press that the Bible was accessible to
the common
folk. So before that, the canon was really
whatever the
preacher had and whatever the preacher wanted to use.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even until like 367 AD that we see someone write down a list of what they think is canon, and then it wasn't even finalized in the way that we know it now until the Council of Trent in 1563. Like, that's a lot of time to do games of intergenerational telephone. Or just like, he was born in a cave, and by cave, of course, I mean manger, and he went over here. By here, I mean over there, and it just gets completely fucked. So who decides what is canon? There's other factors that decide. Like in a recent interview, famous author Neil Gaiman was talking about the opportunity that he had to write an episode of Doctor Who, a show that he was a huge fan of. He had the right connections, and he got a chance to write an episode of Doctor Who. And the interviewer asked him, so was there stuff that you wrote that didn't make it into it? And he's like, yeah, tons of it. I wrote a huge story, but things get cut for various reasons, mostly time and money. If you're producing a television show, you're always going to shoot, more than you have time to show. And then, the most heartbreaking part of making a movie or a show is cutting out bits and
parsing it down to the final product.
Exactly.
And that's why you have things like director's cuts, or in the case of Neil Gaiman, they just came out with the 10th anniversary edition of American Gods, which is kind of one of his trademark books. And in the introduction to that, he said, this book is a little bit different than the book that you've been reading previously. It's got something like 1,000 words more. There's some parts that originally I had to cut out because of time restraints, or because of that my editor was like, hey, you know what, I don't think this works.
Yeah, you can't include this.
But I really liked it.
Yeah.
And so I have this edition that now I want to put out as the definitive edition of the book, which includes more than the previous edition.
Yeah, and the director's cut is that episode was going to air like in the previous season, several episodes before it actually did. So he had to rewrite the whole thing too to make sense in different contexts. So a lot of changes happened during that process, because like Doctor Who goes back to the 60s. There was a large canon of Doctor Who, and there's a lot of stuff to work within the bounds, a lot of restrictions and guidelines and stuff. But of course, the very nature of Doctor Who is not bound by time or space or logic. So it's a cool balance of those two things. But really, it's time, money. So their goal is to shoot and not spend all the money on the first scene, is what he said. Because with special effects and stunt doubles and all of these things they had, like we had a scene where it took place in the pool, but the main actress didn't swim, so we would have had to hire a double, and we just cut that scene because it wasn't worth it. And it's like, does that mean that section of that show is any less worthy of becoming Doctor Who story canon? No, it just got cut for whatever reason. Just didn't happen
to make it. Yeah. Just the same way that a lot of the books of the New Testament, if they didn't suit the political climate of the time, then they could have been, removed just because of, something that was really inconsequential to the canon. It was just something that didn't happen to work out at the time. Or
it didn't jive with what was being taught or what was wanted to be enforced.
Yeah, or if it was just like, oh yes, so and so had a vendetta against this guy, and so he liked this book and the other guy didn't, and so that one didn't get included or something like that. It's there could
Exactly.
be a
Pretty
whole
arbitrary.
bunch of different factors that could include, which have nothing to do with the canon itself or the story.
Yeah, exactly. If you have something that's sacred to you, whether it be Star Trek, Doctor Who, or Jesus, when you hear things that don't
I like that.
jive,
Mixing those three things in the same category.
oh, it's all fiction. Yeah. And yeah, we're talking about renewing it for a different, regenerating it, as it were, making it relevant for another generation, like this ain't your daddy's Jesus kind of a thing, where you have the old Dark Ages Jesus where you almost think he's gay because he's just, he's not married and he's really thin and frail and he's a little too nice to everyone, even when they slap him in the face and stuff like that, to a modern version like the one that I was growing up believing in, was one that was stronger. He was a carpenter. He was a healthy guy. He was strong, and it was
He was
his
big,
strength.
strong American Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah, he was. His strength was that he could resist evil and overcome it, and he had a higher threshold for pain. But of course, he had fucking superpowers. So why is that impressive? I already went off on that in the previous episode.
Well, it's like, and now Jesus is kind of white.
Yes.
Yeah, I was actually having the discussion with somebody at work the other day. I have no idea how the conversation veered in that direction, but we were talking about Jesus and his ethnicity, and she was talking about how, everybody thinks that Jesus is white. Like the image that everyone has when they think Jesus is a bearded white guy. And I'm like, okay, if anything at all, if you think about it for 2 seconds, the first thing you're going to know is Jesus was not white.
It's like, why is this Italian-looking guy living in the Middle East at that time?
Yeah, it's just it's ridiculous that, I mean, it just kind of shows that who the audience is that Jesus is being catered to.
Well, and it really shows the complete lack of thought, because you really only have to think about that for 2 seconds. And you go, hey,
you're like, wait a minute.
there weren't white people there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's that same ethnocentricity that you saw in South America, where the Last Supper was with a guinea pig or something like that, right? Where it's, they would have eaten the finest meal for the Last Supper, and so they picked their local dish and put it in the painting. Like, I'm pretty sure they weren't eating guinea pig for the Last Supper.
it's one of those things that, in writing, you have to be very careful about. If you're writing for a period, you got to make sure that what you're writing about these characters and what they're doing
It's period
fits the
correct.
period.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're going alternate universe, or if you're doing like steampunk or something like that, it's there's some leeway.
Well, that's part of the things that you have to be.
But if you're writing Sherlock Holmes in the period where Sherlock Holmes was originally created,
You can't have him listening to an iPod.
You can't have him. You can't have him calling up Watson and say, "Hey, Watson,
Can you Google this for me?
I mean, they did reinvent that series for New
Yes.
Generation, where he is using cell phones and Google, and it's a freaking great show.
It is a good
highly
show.
recommend it. But that's
But
the
it's
thing,
established that it's in this time.
right, and you've got to think, when you're writing something and when you're portraying an image of something, you have to make sure that it fits historically. Unless, of course, like we said, you're establishing this is like alternate universe Jesus. This is white Jesus.
Yeah.
We have Arabic Jesus, but we're making white man Jesus.
we want to have our mascots look like us.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because actually that reminds me, the original term for the word hero meant more mascot. I forget what the original Greek word, but basically it wasn't necessarily someone of moral excellence, but it was someone that was their champion or represented them the best. And so, yeah, you could have an asshole hero, I mean, Hercules was a piece of shit. He's an awful, awful person who I have no...
Well, like father, like son.
that is
Zeus
true.
was a dick.
He was a big old dick.
Bam! Well, everybody, tip back your glass. We're going to commune with the spirits. Right now, I am communing with the Kragenmore. It's actually a special bottling. It's what's called a signatory, which means that it's not bottled by Kragenmore itself, that someone bought the cask and just bottled it themselves, aged it a little bit longer. It's 14 years. and it's natural color. It's bottled at a higher percentage, so it's everything I like about the original Cragganmore 12, just more so. You know, it's stronger and it's no color added, so that's just fantastic. I would recommend it to anybody if you can find any of these Cragganmore signatories. Signatories are always great because they're always non-chill filtered and always no color added.
Today I am going to be communing with the spirit of Killian's Irish Red. It is a beer that I like. By the way, can you tell me a little bit more about this beer? Because I know it's red and I like it. Is it a?
That's really all you need to know.
Ale? Like, what is it?
It's a red ale. That's a specific type of beer.
Okay.
I don't know much about how it's made, but if you're a fan of beer, it's a type of beer to go for.
Yeah, I mean it's an ale and it's got more body to it.
It's less bitter than a pale ale would be. Obviously not as thick or smoky as like a stout or a porter would be. Mm-hmm. It's
nice in the middle.
Yeah, it's
That's
very.
why I like red
beer.
and brown ales are some of my favorites, just because they're a good mixture of everything.
Okay, I am communing with the spirit of good old Michael Collins Irish whiskey. The one that I'm drinking is a blend, aged in oak casks, so it's got a little bit of oak flavor to it.
Triple distilled.
Yes, I'm a fan of whiskey in general. Just recently started getting into Scotch whiskey. I originally started with Irish whiskey, which is why I kind of prefer it. It's a little bit smoother. It's not as harsh to take as Scotch whiskey is. It's a little bit sweeter usually.
Yeah, it's a good one for whiskey beginners. It's good one to start
whereas,
with.
Scotch, you often have smoky flavors or, very woody flavors or even like the peat flavors that you get.
Yeah, ones that are more complex and so it kind of takes you a while to get into.
It's one of those things that once you understand the flavor profile, it's a lot easier to enjoy. Mm-hmm. Whereas Irish whiskey is generally speaking a lot smoother, a lot easier to drink, and like you said, it's easier for beginners to start out on. Jameson probably being one of the most famous Irish whiskeys. In my opinion, it's the least good of the ones that I've tried. Not to say that Jameson is a bad whiskey.
Yeah.
The Michael Collins is very sweet. It's very smooth. It's very easy to swallow. Doesn't really burn too much. And sometimes, especially when I'm drinking it over ice, I get a slight hint of apple, which is very interesting.
Yeah, Irish whiskeys are kind of known for those light floral and citrus tones. Same with like lowlands as scotches.
Okay, let's talk about continuity. The canon is the established continuity of the show. Let's talk about what that means. I'll give you the definition that it's okay. The uninterrupted connection, succession, or union, or uninterrupted duration or continuation, especially without essential change. Okay. A universe has rules. Remember, the word canon or canon means rule in Greek. So you have rules that you're going to have to obey. One, like for an example, the rules of time travel in the Back to the Future universe are different from those of Doctor Who or Bill and Ted. When Doc Brown says you're not thinking fourth dimensionally, he's talking about when you go. He's in the mall in 1985. He goes back to 1955. He's in that area where the mall was, and he runs into the pine trees that the malls were actually named after.
Right, yeah, the twin pine versus the lone pine.
Yeah.
Exactly. He had to be in that same location, when I go back to 1885, the Indians won't even be there because he's like, I'm going to crash into that billboard.
Yeah.
That's following H.G. Wells.
Oh, yeah?
The way that the Time Machine by H.G. Wells is written is he moves through time, but not through space.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it describes when he's on the time machine, the nameless time traveler. He gets on the machine and he turns it on to travel through time. It describes what's going on around him, and it's entirely too fast for him really to notice. But he does notice things. The light changes really fast. Night and day going by very quickly. He notices the room around him kind of falling apart, and other things coming up around it and being built up and torn down and things like that. So he's in the same spot for a long period of time, but he's just moving through it much quicker.
exactly.
Right. So it's like hitting a rewind button on the universe, and it's just going back and back and back.
Yeah,
and he's-
Or fast forward. Yeah.
now in
As
Bill
opposed
and
to, Bill and Ted
Yeah,
or Doctor Who, they just appear. They travel through space
Time
and
and
time
space.
Right.
simultaneously.
yeah, in fact, the word TARDIS is time and relative displacement in space. They're saying that's what stands.
I always
Dimension.
wondered what that stood for.
Isn't dimension?
What did I say?
You said displacement.
Oh, time.
Time
Oh,
and
you're right.
relative
Time
dimension.
and relative dimension in space. Yeah.
Well, because since the method of time travel is not known, then you pick one. It's like, so do you stay in the same 3-dimensional space while the 4th dimension is changing, or do you just go through all of them at once? Because time and space are completely linked. So it's it has to be one of those two.
And it's a lot more convenient for for telling a story because it's like, okay, I'm 100 years back, but I'm on the other side of the planet or the solar system. I'm gonna like,
Yeah, but I'm still in Cardiff.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's cool. The time circuits in the DeLorean and Back to the Future, you just hit the things to put in the date. But in Bill and Ted, you're pushing all these numbers with this big phone book, and that gives you the time, date, and place, and all that stuff. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, whereas in H.G. Wells, it's not there's no I want to go to 30,000 years from now. You just go, and when you
And then
feel
you
like stopping,
stop,
you
yeah.
stop it.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
They didn't have
Yeah,
much
they did the
control
same
over
thing
it.
in Futurama. There's a Futurama episode where they travel through time, and it's the same way.
yeah. It's just you start the machine, and when you feel like stopping, you stop it.
Continuity means coherence within your universe. So if you have something that's supposed to be taking place in this universe, reality, and then you all of a sudden have animals that start talking, you're like, okay, so what's happened actually is kind of a paradigm shift where, it's actually a different universe.
Like
it's
Alvin and
not
the
this one.
Chipmunks.
Exactly.
Or if you think of
X-Men.
like in Star Trek 2, when, spoiler alert, Spock dies, you can't just start up Star Trek 3 and have him there. Because there's rules of the universe that once someone's dead, they had to create a way to bring him back.
Create the way to
And they
undo
had to
the death.
and they had to explain it in a way that was consistent with the laws of our universe, because it's still saying that it takes place in our universe, not in an alternate dimension.
Exactly, because it takes place in the future of this real universe. So yeah, they do have science fiction-y and fantastical stuff, but they just basically say,
But it's still all our science, our physics.
well, that
all
and
that
it's like we don't know everything yet, so there could be a way to reunite a soul and a body. Like we don't know because there's just too much shit to learn. But I would like to talk about continuity errors. That's the classic example is if you have a scene, where everyone's at the dinner table and a guy has a green shirt and his hair is parted to the left, and then it cuts to someone else who says a line. Then when you cut back, the guy's wearing a red shirt and his hair is parted the other way. It's distracting. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
It throws you. It's jarring. The other example I like is back in the early days of film, you would have like someone sitting on a couch and the doorbell rings, and you would see the person get up, walk all the way over to the door, and then open the door and say hi to someone. Now, after a long time doing that, it eats up a ton of screen time, right? So they can cut that to where doorbell rings, you cut to the person on the couch being aware of the noise being made, and then you can cut straight to opening the door. As long as all the things stay the same shirt, same hair, and all that stuff, then the audience understands that that's happening within a few seconds. Now, if it's like they get up and they're wearing different clothes and they're wearing glasses now, or like, did this happen like a week later, or what's going on here? And when you have that, it throws you out of the story, and our brains don't like that.
We're talking mainly large continuity errors. There even in modern filmmaking, there are small continuity errors that you don't necessarily notice unless you're looking for them. Prime example: Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indiana Jones is running around through Egypt trying to find the basket where Marion is being carried. There's a lot of shots of him from the back, and if you look at it, the sweat stain on his back changes size almost every shot.
Yeah.
Which is something that most people don't really care about and don't really notice because they're not looking at it. They're looking at Indiana Jones running around and they're worried about Marion.
Yeah.
If they're in the story.
Yeah. I actually never noticed that.
I only noticed it because I saw it on the internet. Somebody was like,
I was gonna say,
continuity
and,
errors in this. And I was
and
like,
if
that's
you-
kind of funny.
And if you watch something a million times,
You'll
then
start to
pick up
notice
on
things
stuff
like that.
Just because you're not watching as much for the story because you know the story.
And
Yeah.
know, continuity errors like the ones you're talking about. That's a really hard thing to say for me for some reason. Continuity errors, like the ones you're talking about, are
Pretty minor.
They're
Well,
kind of a
some
filmmaker's job to make sure that they're not there. The errors are not there.
You
know?
have people, especially that's their job.
Is to look at every scene and say, okay, this person looked like this, and now it's 5 seconds later. Do they still look the same?
Yeah, because it could be weeks between shooting that
Yeah.
same scene, especially when you do pickup takes, where you finish filming the movie, you've wrapped, and you go, oh shit, we need to do one more line in that scene, and you did that 3 months ago. New haircut, you get the
It's
same
like you have
haircut,
to
everything.
reconstruct the way that things were at that time.
Exactly. Yeah, you have people who just go through the painstaking labor. Apparently not on Star Wars Phantom Menace, by the way, because Obi-Wan's hair changes length and
His
everything.
ponytail changes sides all the time.
Oh, no, that didn't happen.
Another
but,
reason that movie's shit.
Yeah, one of a few reasons.
I'd say many.
Many.
One of many. You're right.
Many. Well, what happens when something enters the public domain?
Yeah, I guess.
Because you own the copyright over what work that you've made. So as long as they keep making movies about like Batman, then they maintain control over the canon. But if you let that lapse, then anybody can do it. And the next person that does it now has control of the canon, right?
Yeah, but it won't be accepted. If it doesn't fall within that pre-established framework of what Batman is and does, if you all of a sudden have where his parents didn't die and he decided to run an ice cream store instead, the audience, there's no audience that's going to accept that as the real Batman. It'll be this fake.
Yeah.
fake crap.
I think oftentimes, and not all the time, I'll get into that, but oftentimes the people who are making these films or writing the stories or whatever, the ones in charge of the canon, they do often listen to the fan base. You know, if like you said, if the fans are not going to accept a Batman whose parents weren't killed when he was a child, they're not going to write it. Certain exceptions being people like George Lucas.
I was like, you think?
Yeah, certain exceptions.
Well, I mean, a good example of that is that most Batman fans don't acknowledge Batman and Robin as
Right. As well as most Star Wars fans don't acknowledge the special editions of episodes 4, 5, and 6 as canon. They want
The original,
versions, which weren't touched up or messed up, as a lot of people think. And you know, as well as some people, including myself, refuse to accept Kingdom of the Crystal Skull as canon in the Indiana Jones universe.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I remember I was reading an argument about whether Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, is canon because Gene Roddenberry hated it so much that he actually used the words "this isn't canon." And I thought about that because it's also like the animated series that people say isn't canon because it has some things that disagree with other stuff in the universe. And a guy said in response to that, well, did he call it Star Trek and receive a paycheck for that work? Yes, then it's fucking canon. And it is there, and you have to deal with it, and you have to defend it because it was all
not entirely
produced.
true.
It was all produced under the name of Star Trek. Now, by the way, I love Star Trek V. I don't care what anyone says, it's all canon. Unfortunately, that means I have to include the shitty Next Generation under those guidelines.
I agree with you that if the copyright owners say it's canon, it's canon. That's, you know, unfortunately, I have to accept.
There was a movie
I have
with
to
bat
realize.
nipples. We have to accept that.
I have to realize.
I don't think I do. I don't have to accept fucking Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I don't have to accept the prequel trilogy.
The thing
It's
is,
not canon to me.
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull exists. It's a movie that was made by the original filmmakers to include in the canon. I will never own it, and I've seen it once and will never see it again. Because I thought it was just terrible. And canon, like you said, is controlled by the copyright owners.
Well, here's what canon means to me. So, the original Star Wars trilogy, that to me is the only Star Wars trilogy canon. They can make other movies, they can make special editions, they can insert things, they can delete
They
things.
can make crappy animated TV shows.
They can make Han not shooting first. To me, none of that is canon because I'm not going to defend any of that if someone says, like, you know, if
Star
someone brings
Wars
them,
sucks
Yeah, so, like-
because of Jar Jar Binks. Like, well,
So the Star Wars canon to me is those three. And it could be the same for religious texts where you say this is officially canon, but people just, it's like, it's in there,
Yeah,
but I'm
people
not
are
going
like,
to defend
you know
it.
what,
I'm not
Song
going
of
to say
Solomon
anything.
is kind of weird.
Yeah, it's canonized,
And
but it's no one.
It's not spiritual at all. You're
You're not going to find anyone who's going to defend anything in Song of Solomon just because all it is pornographic poetry.
pretty much. Yeah. And it's like you said, it's accepted in the Bible as official
As
Bible
theoretical
canon.
but not operational canon. That you aren't going to get
Right.
people, quoting it, defending it.
So I guess we're saying that canon kind of has two different definitions. There's the definition
There's the
of
official canon, then
there's the official
accepted
canon, and then the accepted canon, which
can vary from individual to individual.
Yeah, you would have to do that to cover everything.
and I'm
that's released.
debating whether or not I'm going to accept Skyward Sword into the Legend of Zelda canon because the bastard is right-handed.
Yeah,
Same reason I accept the GameCube version of Twilight Princess into canon, but not the Wii version because they mirrored the Wii version, so he's right-handed.
Bastards.
yeah. You
They're
remember,
anti-left-handists. Let's get ready to rage with our fatwas of the week.
All right. Well, my fatwa of the week is on nothing we've talked about today. It's about artificial sweeteners. They piss me off to no end. It just seems stupid to me. First of all, when you consume them, they fuck with your sense of sweet. So you actually have real sugar and it tastes odd and strange. Second of all, it actually causes your body to crave more sweet and kind of makes you a fat ass.
Yeah.
it makes you more likely to eat shit.
It makes you more
because-
likely to eat sweet stuff or artificially sweet stuff. Third of all, it doesn't taste all that good.
Horrible.
And lastly, if you want the sweet, fucking deal with the calories. That's
then work 'em off.
my it's like Coke Zero. It's Coca-Cola with no calories. I'm like,
No, it's not.
what's the point of consuming something without any calories? Calories are there to help your body. You just have to choose which ones you consume and how many you consume. If you're too fucking dumb or too fucking lazy to worry about that, you deserve to be a fat ass.
Well, yeah, it's people who want to take the easy way out, who they're not willing to make the necessary sacrifice to achieve their goal. If I want to lose weight, I'm going to switch to diet soda instead of regular soda, instead of working out or eating or not drinking soda at all.
But chances are, if you drink diet soda, you're going to start drinking a ton more soda than you would have originally.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't satisfy you as much.
Oh, yeah, because it's shit.
Okay. My fatwa is on subtle accusations of theft by large corporations. I don't mind going into a store and seeing a video camera with a screen by it that shows me with a sign under it that says,
Smile, you're
we're
on
looking
camera.
at you, asshole. Don't steal anything. But when they do studies that say, if you walk into a store, if someone addresses you, an individual addresses you, it makes you less likely to shoplift something. And so they have a greeter at the door that won't let you walk by without saying hi to you and try to make eye contact with you. And that's just, they're subtly trying to influence you.
As someone who works in retail and has to greet people as they enter the door, or am supposed to greet people as they enter the door, in that line of work, it's one of the most annoying parts of the job.
Yes.
Is, okay, if I'm involved in a customer and I'm talking to them and selling them the product, I don't want to interrupt that conversation and possibly lose the sale by ignoring the person directly in front of me with whom I'm having a conversation and turn to somebody who just walked in the door and say, hello.
Yeah.
They don't make you do that shit, do they?
Oh, they do.
They
Holy
do.
God.
Everywhere you go.
Everywhere
You can't
you
walk
go.
into a door in any business
And
without being...
that's another thing that I hate about it is walking into places and constantly like, hi, how you doing? Welcome to Best Buy, whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, do you need my help? You walk into a different section of Best Buy. You're in the DVDs. Like, did you find anything okay?
Yeah.
You walk into the games. Did you need help looking for something? Leave me the fuck alone until I go to the front counter with my goddamn purchases.
Well, like, if I want your help, I'm going to ask for it. Be present, but don't talk to me.
Exactly.
There's other things too about, like, if you walk out the door of, say, Best Buy that we were talking about, there's two automatic doors and they open... They won't open one right after the other. There's a delay so that you can't run out the door with something. And every time I walk through those, I would say I walk faster than the average person. So I have to slow down. And every time I do, I go like, I know what you're doing. Don't think you're being tricky. So that's my fatwa. Things like that.
My fatwa will be issued against the new movie Captain America, and it's not because, well, okay, there's a few reasons why I'm so pissed off. Because instead of being an actual movie about Captain America, where you get to really develop the character and enjoy Captain America's story. Now, I've actually read Captain America comic books, and I know the character and I like him. Instead of having that, a Captain America movie, what it was basically a 90-minute teaser trailer for the Avengers movie, which now I'm a lot less excited to see than I was before seeing this movie. Because what it did is it basically introduced a whole bunch of useless shit in it that was only going to make sense in an Avengers movie and not in a Captain America movie. And that irritates me, because like with Thor came out, it was a fun romp. Thor has always been to me a two-dimensional character. They kind of inserted this character arc where he starts out as kind of a brat and then becomes a real man and all that stuff.
I always thought it was strange that they included a Norse god in comic books as a superhero.
It's, that didn't even phase, because I don't care about Thor. I always found him boring.
I mean, what's the difference between these gods and
Jesus
these
will
superheroes?
appear in a comic book before too long. I guarantee it.
Well, the thing is that like Jesus will appear in comic books when people stop believing in him as an actual deity.
Exactly. But like that movie, it was here, it went, it wasn't offensive, it wasn't terrible, it was just fun. It was this nice little fish out of water story with a god in the mortal world. Fine. And that was all just a setup movie. But what annoys me is that there already was an Avengers movie. There was a cartoon straight to DVD movie that was great. And it had all these characters that had Thor, and they didn't have to spend any time developing them. They had, they made it work. And they
made it work for the people who know about it.
Yeah. Even
These comic book movies that come out are generally
They're mass appeal.
They're for the fans, obviously.
Well, the thing is that they don't have to pull in the fans. The fans are going to see the movie.
Exactly. That's one of my points. Like, I'm going to go see anything. I'm a nerd. I'm going to see anything that says Superman, Batman, Green Lantern. I'm already
anything
there.
Made by Marvel, you're going to be there. Any
or
Marvel or DC thing, you're going to be there.
I am already there. But what I don't like is the fact that, like, if they really wanted to have you understand and get into this character and stuff, you would actually treat the character story properly, because you don't know them.
They actually did a very good job, I think.
Compared to both the comic books and other movie iterations, they did a pretty piss poor
Well,
job.
Jeremy, have you read the comic
I will
books?
admit to have never having read a Captain America comic.
See, I think this proves the point exactly.
However, going into the movie knowing absolutely nothing about Captain America, I was impressed at the character as being, it addresses, it's a very good story about the little guy, the little guy achieving because he's got a good heart. That's the core of the Captain America movie. It's obviously setting up for the Avengers movie so that people know who the fuck this guy is. But at the heart of the movie, it's a story about the little guy getting power and knowing its value, therefore not abusing it.
Yeah, that's what the part of it was good.
Story is about.
Chris Evans was really good, gave a good performance, but I thought the script sucked. That the whole thing felt like this, written by a committee of nerds going, then this should happen, then you should have a motorcycle, and then this should happen, and it just felt like.
I think that's what happens when you listen to the fans too much, maybe.
Oh no, it's the studio system is how they write scripts now. They just get a bunch of baboons together and start writing shit.
I actually felt the complete opposite, and again, it's probably because I've never read the comic.
Mm-hmm.
But Captain America jumps out on this motorcycle. It's like, why the hell is it that every fucking badass superhero has a motorcycle? That's awesome.
Because motorcycles are badass. That's why.
I knew about the whole flying shield thing, and I was honestly pretty skeptical. I've played the Avengers video game on Genesis.
Yeah.
So I knew a little bit about Captain America. I know that he dresses like he does, and I know he's got a flying shield.
Bag, yeah.
That's really all I knew about him. And I was honestly very skeptical about the shield thing, and it did not feel
they made
cheesy.
It
did not feel gimmicky to me. And again, the story beneath the film was told very well, I think. You have Captain America, who's the little guy who got the power and didn't abuse it. He used it for good because he's a good person. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Red Skull. By the way, Hugo Weaving is amazing.
He's awesome.
And he will always be amazing. But all that aside, yes, I do have a little man crush on Hugo Weaving. I'll admit it.
It's okay.
Who doesn't?
But he's the character who wasn't necessarily the little guy. He had, bad intentions, and he got the power, and what did he do with it? He used it for evil. And it's
the juxtaposition. Yeah.
It's a story about what you do with power when you get it. And I think that story was told very well. So I think it was a very good movie.
Okay.
We'll have to agree to disagree on that one because there's just so much shit that was missing.
And I'm going to agree to probably not watch that movie because I don't like superhero movies.
Okay.
We'd like to thank you for joining us this week on the Church of Awesome. You have been awesome, and we have been awesome. We'd like to leave you now with the gift of tongues.
Bik albo nie bik, oto just pytanie. Si shall shet nie jeździ, lisie, sierpiek, stropy i strozali zawistnego losu, albo zjak bron persisiko, morzu nedsi, i sprezuzak si konegi.
This ain't your daddy's Jesus.
Did you guys know Spock is a dinosaur?
If you have something that's sacred to you, whether it be Star Trek, Doctor Who, or Jesus,
Kind of makes you a fat ass.
I don't have to accept fucking Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I don't have to. It's not canon to me.
Zeus was a dick.
The comments made by the hosts and other participants are the opinions of the individuals and not those of any corporate entity. All data and information provided in this program is for informational purposes only. The Church of Awesome makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, currentness, suitability, or validity of any information in this program and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. If you like what you've heard in today's sermon, come visit us at churchofawesome.com or follow us on Twitter at COA Podcast.